You're probably wondering who I am and how I came up with this stuff. And essentially, uh, I was born, obviously. Um, I was a pretty kind-hearted child. Not trying to puff myself up. I'm just saying I was like one of those kids that was always going around, saving bugs and uh, shit like that. A little too nice, maybe a teacher's pet. Um, and I got bullied a lot in school actually because of that. People naturally are adverse to something as honest as compassion and as diligent as honoring one's teacher or seeking some kind of intelligence beyond strength, uh, which is a pretty common experience actually for a very large amount of people um, in the world. I think a lot of people would agree with me that way. A lot of people, once they get older, are finally able to admit this, though they couldn't admit it when they were younger. Um, and it's a pretty touchy subject for a lot of people. It's not really touchy for me anymore. Um, but yeah, it bothers people. I think we can admit that. Um, anyway, I'll probably make another video on that subject itself, but grew up, um, had a pretty sheltered childhood, you could say, a little bit. Um, but then high school came along, and I kind of I hit the puberty or whatever. Got into marijuana for probably the first time in my life. Felt like I wasn't a complete loser. Ironically, because I was starting to become one. You gotta admire the irony. Um, so yeah, smoked a little bit too much of weed, and at this point, I was a complete atheist, by the way. And yeah, a very interesting thing happened. Every time I would smoke weed, this intense fear would rise up in me from nowhere, and I couldn't really define it. I think a lot of people, when this happens to them, they start to blame external circumstances. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of the cops. I'm afraid of being judged by these people or of crowds or whatever. But ultimately, I realized that it's a biological fear. It's an actual fear. And I'll probably make another video on what biological fear is, the difference between biological fear and what's traditionally known as fear, which is quite important actually. But I experienced something ultimately, which has been known by many things, but it's usually known as Kundalini or a Kundalini like experience of some kind of vital evolution that greatly affects the actual biological functioning of your nervous system, uh, and the sensations that happen in your body. Which sounds intense, and it is, and it really wrecked my health. So I went on a journey, and at that point, I basically, my normal life was over. My whole life was about the journey to find out what had happened to me. What is this? What is this? So, it took me a while. I had theories. I thought I had fibromyalgia or something. And I discovered something called qigong, and qigong uh, basically uses breathing and focus to get in tune with your body, you move your energy and you clear the blockages, and then the channels open. And when the channels open, you get healthy again. So I tried Qigong, and it's actually the only thing that worked, and it did help me. And I did slowly start to get healthier. Um, and I found other things, like people like Robert Bruce's works on astral projection and psychic self-defense and energy work. Robert Bruce's concept of energy work being based purely, the most important fact being sensation, and the energy really influenced me that way. And I watched The Secret and learned about the law of attraction, and a lot of cool stuff like that. I researched Kundalini and Kriya Yoga and read the autobiography of a yogi. But, you're kind of left with the question after all that. What is the end-all be-all of all of this? Do I have to just pick one path and go with it? Which parts are real and which parts are just made up, And, when I first started doing this, it's like, is this just a waste of my time? I'm putting all this effort into something, and it's just like, is any of it even real, and whatnot? So, lots of questions along those two lines. Well, first of all, I realized, yes, the chakras are real because I experienced them for myself. Tailbone, lower back, kind of, anyway, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and though it is true that there's actually 12 major centers. You have to account for the frontal line, which is the 5 organs, which is just as much, or if not more important than the chakras: fire, metal, wood, earth, and water, which I've also experienced for myself. I actually have the ability, because of this training, to be able to feel any part of my body, like my heart or my brain, and be able to tell what's going on in it, which is actually pretty easy if you follow this path. It's just like a natural progression of what's possible through any kind of internalized focused training in this way. It's kind of preposterous to think that you can't exercise your nervous system or your organs. It's preposterous. Anyway, I'll make another video on that. But so the point is, I did a lot of this, and I ultimately discovered that there is a unifying principle behind all of these things, which I just call the law of one. And that law is basically just love. If you focus on love anywhere in your body, you will activate that channel. So that's kind of the bottom line. And once you start living your life that way, you start to learn all these other things. And as long as you're living your life that way and you're not self-contracted, your mind starts expanding in a way that you can't see and no one else can see, but you just start to know things out of experience, not out of mental machinations. So anyways, that's a little bit of background on who I am and what I know.